Thank you for this clear presentation. Unfortunately, I probably have to complicate the situation a little bit more. In the Water Framework Directive reporting process, you mentioned the two legally defined entities in the directive. This is River Basin District and Water Body. But in the process of developing the report or the reporting, it turned out that both have certain drawbacks in the reporting, especially the Water Framework, the River Basin District, so that it was an agreement to introduce an ad hoc defined intermediate level so-called subunits on which most of the aggregations are mapped. The point was that River Basin District was so heterogeneous in size. It was from the Danube with 180,000 square kilometers to some small river basin districts on certain islands with some 500 square kilometers. So we still do a lot of work on this intermediate level, so I think it should be also reflected in that point. And the other point would be the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, where you clearly mentioned the agglomeration as one of the key concepts. But if you look in the legislation, agglomeration is more or less technically defined and has no definite geographic scope. There is no need to formally delineate agglomerations, but it's used more or less an ad hoc definition. And I think also some thoughts have to be put into that point so that there is streamlining with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive could take place. But in general, especially with the cross-linking of the discussions, I think we're on the right track here. But probably it would be useful not only to participate in the WISE technical group, but also on the general reporting group where the reporting concepts are defined. And I think knowledge from both sides could be really useful for that process. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the detailed comments. On the subunits, these are included in the data model of management, area management, as well as a zone type in its own, or under the River Basin District. Daya, Alex, help me here.
Yeah, subunits are included. We received one of the comments in this Inspire consultation, so they are included as an extension to the main zone, which is River Basin District, as a specialized zone type. On the other topic of the agglomeration, I must admit that I wrongly interpreted Angel's slide here. That's probably why there was no theme added to that. So it's probably, if it's not a spatial data set exists on that, of course it will not have to be made available if there's no spatial data. Yeah. Any other? Sorry.
Maybe on the issue of governance between these different processes, because you say we need to go up and to a higher level of discussion. Just recently there was a meeting again on of the marine directors, and one of the papers on the table, and I'm just reading the title for you, regarded reporting of biodiversity features under the Habitat, Birds and Marine Strategy Framework directives, because there's quite a bit of overlap between the two. And in the conclusion of the paper, which was endorsed by the marine directors, it actually reads that to this end, the marine directors are committed to continued close collaboration with member states to the longer-term development of reporting into WISE Marine with the following long-term objectives. Jointly develop WISE Marine as a comprehensive and shared European data and information management system for the marine environment, which supports implementation of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And now it comes. This will also include the use of the EMODnet, which is DG Mare's initiative to collate available data with some financial resources behind it, and inspire processes to establish the required infrastructure and data access. So basically, it's quite well understood now also by the highest level of governance around these processes that this infrastructure and data access will be inspire process-based. So it only emphasizes for us the need at the technical level to work very closely together and to follow these developments. And in particular, because later on it actually says that they will be in particularly addressing the streamlining of the future reporting requirements, which of course will have an impact again on Inspire. And the harmonizing reporting under the Marine Strategy Framework Directive with that of other EU directives and policies, e.g. for regional sea conventions. So as this harmonizing of reporting comes together, again, I think our task under Inspire will become much, much simpler in terms of governance as well. So, thank you. Sorry.
Thanks, Hugo. Any other comments and questions on the whys? Yes, please.
Thank you. Maybe it's the time to ask for a question because we have some problems of human resources or budgetary resources in our countries, and what is absolutely sure is that we can't afford to have the burden of do the job twice. And my question is, flood directive is in WISE, and I was very surprised last week to see that in the flood directive reporting sheet we have to give maps of water bodies to, I think, European agency. And what is it? Of course, all water bodies were sent through WISE to everyone who asked for. And my colleagues have to doing maps of water bodies, which is not so easy. And to send, so they have sent JPEG pictures of water bodies to someone. And what's the reason for that burden? Is it really what we want to do with Inspire? Don't you think we have to, we could manage to avoid some jobs in our countries, and maybe in your side, by doing more congruent, more flexible? If you need that, please ask in your catalogs if you have it, because if you ask for twice the same thing, what we have in all countries is the Commission doesn't take care of our burden. And so it's very difficult to explain to our colleagues that it's asked for, of course, but we are in huge organizations all together, and someone, the right hand, don't know what does the left hand. So please, if you have some data in your catalogs and your repositories, don't ask us to do the job again.
Well, we will definitely take that message home with us. Not that we didn't know, besides the colleague of the EEA can also say a few words on this. But we see these directives emerging at different moments in time, and there are these discussions on what is going to be reported and so on. We have done with the SAIS basis project, as you may remember, an assessment of all these overlaps, where even at the level of parameters which were asked under 2, 3, 4 different reporting obligations. Sometimes these issues only become apparent when you have a very powerful, centralized even, catalog system where you can see what has already been reported, what is not. And I think with the evolution that we are also promoting through the SAIS initiative towards the streamlining of the reporting systems, what we are proposing at this stage. We will gradually overcome this administrative burden, which is really a very, very high priority. Because you're absolutely right, this is of course not efficient, and therefore in the current climate it's also not acceptable. But perhaps the colleagues from the EEA who are also involved in these discussions can also comment on what is the vision for the next phase of WISE.
You know that I'm not working on WISE anymore, Hugo, but I can give it a try. I mean, and somebody maybe correct me, but I think the water body delineation was in order to determine entities to report good ecological status. So based on that, in the initial WFD exercise, water bodies have been reported. The flood water bodies could be water bodies which are actually been defined based on different characteristics related to the sensitivity for floods. So this is a guess from myself. From my side, I don't know exactly that, and unless anybody else knows, we could look this up in another context. But it could be that this is different because a different use purpose is behind this water body delineation.
Okay, I think we will probably have a look into that between the three services. I mean, we had a similar question, basically asking ourselves with the Water Framework Directive water body that we have in the model, and the question was, why do we need to have a separate water body for the Water Framework Directive and not reuse the one that is already defined in hydrography? And what we were told is that, but correct me if I'm wrong, is that there may be administrative issues going into the delineation of the Water Framework Directive water bodies and river basin districts that might influence also the geometry and the shape of the water bodies. But as I said, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes.
Of course, at our state level, we have only one data set. So the colleagues take the data set from the French Organization on Water and doing JPEG. It's pure work for nothing. And the colleague of EEA put the question about WMS, WFS. For our part, it's an evidence. If we have to put data on Inspire network services, we put once, you will reuse many times. That's your words. And so we take your words in account for time. And if we put WMS of flood maps, for example, we will dislike to have to put maps in WISE, in which formats. So double burden. And so please, if we are okay to put data on Inspire infrastructure, almost it's a regulation, so we have to do. WISE is not a regulation. So if we have a regulation to do something, and we have a gentleman agreement as WISE to do another thing, be sure that because of the crisis, economic crisis in our countries, we will take the regulation and drop the WISE.
I mean, I think I have to repeat my point. I think we cannot solve this here. The only thing where I would accept this criticism is, as member state, you provide one river network, and there should not be another river network being asked. One river network. But on top of the river network, you can segment the rivers based on different use. Ecological status for WFD, flood sensitivity for flood directive. This is not necessarily double work. This is a different context and a different thematic segmentation. But maybe we should take this offline and find out if something went wrong.
I would like to support Stefan here. As far as I remember, from the flood directive, the obligation is okay to provide the delineation of the inundated land, for instance. But in case that delineation is the same as a water framework directive body, then you can use that polygon as well. So the idea was to help. If you already define the water surface body, then you use those, so you don't have two geometry there. That's how I understood. So therefore we included those two options in the model of flood in the natural risk zones. That's what I understood from our discussions with this drafting team on reporting. So it's actually a help to member states that if they have already delineated the water surface body, then they can use these geometries.
There's of course also the timing issue. When discussing with the colleagues and they say, Inspire is going to solve that for us, fine. But by when must member states have their data conform to the Inspire data specifications? That's within 2 years, that's within 7 years. But we have a reporting obligation next year, the year after, right? So as long as this timing issue is still overlapping and floating, we are going to continue to have these kind of problems and to adjust gradually towards something which is more stable. So I think we just have to be patient and, again, remember my words, Rome wasn't built in a day. But if there are serious issues which really are going to cost a lot of money, we have to act as fast as possible, both at our side, but also at your side, rapidly implementing the Inspire data specifications, the services and so on, because then the benefits, of course, cost savings will be immediate and not within 5 or 7 years.
Okay. Okay, Wanda.
I mean, this time I want to ask myself a question because you mentioned about so the river-based district in practice doesn't seem to be the most appropriate level of area management, and I'd like to know if you have an opinion regarding our proposal to amend what is currently for Annex 1 in hydrography and to follow the proposal that we just explained here minutes ago. So do you see that it provides a benefit or knowing that practically we only change from one team to another, so the most suitable to define this feature type, and we use exactly the same attributes. Do you see any inconvenience from the implementation point of view, taking into consideration the evolution that it can have still on the way for reporting, the Water Framework Directive, or do you see this is an improvement?
We had no discussion yet in France about this solution, so I can't answer to your question.
When we did help on identifying how hydrography would be defined in Annex 1, we had the idea that the water body needed to be included as a hook for Annex 2 and 3. Now Annex 2 and 3 discussions 3 years later, 3.5 years later, have come up only recently, as I learned as well, with a different model around area management. So naturally, it could not have been foreseen already 3 years ago. So obviously then you have to make some adaptations.
I think one important point is that water bodies in the Water Framework Directive sense are not purely hydrographically defined. They are really areas of management. So, for example, 3 or 4 parallel rivers going through the same level of altitude and flowing together some 50 kilometers below. The three parallel rivers, although not hydrographically directly linked, form a perfect water body in the Water Framework Directive sense. So things always become tricky when legal definitions come into play and decisions how to adjust several special cases to a legal concept. So I also think that mapping, so water framework, water bodies are things which could be definitely distinct from a basic hydrographic understanding.
It is exactly the same with the groundwater bodies, because for the hydrogeologists, the delineation of groundwater bodies are completely different from the groundwater bodies defined by the Water Framework Directive, which is a big problem now.
Thank you. Maybe I can add some more explanations why water bodies for Water Framework Directive are now in area management. So this was one of the main reasons, that they are basically defined as units or areas for the management of water issues. They can fit into the natural borders of water bodies, but they can be different as well and adapted to administrative units or other administrative delineations, which can actually help in collecting of data and providing data. So that's why basic concept is these are management units. Therefore, the basic feature type is in area management, not in hydrography anymore, as it was foreseen. But it keeps all the attributes from how they were already defined in hydrography. So nothing is actually taken away, and nothing is, what is added are just the basic attributes that are required from the area management point of view. This is additionally it is added. It is also proposed to keep the link to the real water bodies as additional information, so you can have a link between management area to the real water bodies behind. But this link can be one-to-one or maybe one-to-many. So we are talking about completely different concepts here.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's very helpful for us to go forward in that direction that we have proposed.